All right. Welcome to this week's live office hours. Casey, how's it going?
Things are good. I don't know about anybody else. I'm feeling pretty good with my status of Christmas shopping. So hopefully everyone's inventory has been moving well, but also making sure you're taking care of those people on the nice list there.
Yeah, I'm the worst to shop for because there's nothing I really want outside of books or
Yeah.
like very, very oddly specific things that I'm not going to ask anybody else to buy for me. So my entire family every year they're like, "You're the worst to shop for." I'm like, "I know, just buy me books." They're like, "Well, that's not fun." I was like, "It's for me." Like,
Yeah.
another stack of books, I'll take it all day. So,
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I requested specifically no clothes this year. I moved to a smaller apartment, so I have less closet space. So
yeah,
hopefully that didn't deter anyone from getting me something nice, but
yeah.
just don't have the space for it. So
I'm very picky about clothes too. I'm grateful, but I very much dislike receiving clothes. Not because I'm ungrateful. It's just like I'm very particular.
yeah, I feel that.
So, see, Ryan, appreciate you joining. So, weekly office hours. There's not a whole lot happening right now. It feels like everybody's kind of in a lull outside of just like hitting up bolo groups and stuff like that. There's not a whole lot of crazy news right now. I feel like the past few months that there's been a lot to talk about. And now everybody, it feels, is just locked in, right? It's just keep doing what you're doing, make the most out of it. I see a lot of people starting to kind of relax a little bit and kind of get ready for the actual end of year season and just start to take some time off, chill, spend time with seller friends, family, whatever. But yeah, we're here. Either way, we're happy to dive into any questions you guys have. Obviously, there's no format here. We just ask that you bring us questions, and we like to go down all these rabbit holes with you. I love when I have awesome, exciting news to share. There's not a whole lot right now. I mean, even the OpenAI 12 Days of Christmas stuff, there's been some cool stuff, certainly. We got full O1, but nobody really cares about anything else. So I don't care about your API. Give me agents. You know, like that's... So I stopped following it until I see on Twitter that they launched agents. I kind of don't care anymore. You know, just I think, you know, speaking for myself at least, very much burnout on the news and trying to keep up with everything. I was talking with a friend this weekend, and he's just like, "Oh, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that?" I'm like, "Yeah," but honestly, like I'm burnt out on caring about everything. So, trying to kind of parse all the stuff that is occurring to figure out what's actually impactful, what's worth paying attention to. And that's kind of difficult, you know?
Yeah.
I really just want to build an AI agent that can scour the entire internet and me just say, here's the stuff I kind of care about, and it just filter it for me, which I'm sure I could do, but you know, friction of automation versus how much you care, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like we had a couple weeks where I don't know if monumental is the right word, but some pretty big releases in the AI space. And though there's continued to be releases, they've definitely been much more on the minor side of in terms of improvements. So not a lot of like collective group chatter around any major updates in the last couple of weeks there. And then, yeah, like in this on the seller front, in the seller space, I think everybody probably falls into two buckets right now. You're either mostly out of inventory and you're kind of doing your Q4 performance assessment or your year in review, kind of figuring out where you won, where you lost, maybe some areas to improve. And then I guess the other bucket of people would be just folks maybe trying to just get rid of that last little bit of inventory. So not quite in that performance assessment period, but I mean, we're coming into just about, exactly 1 week until Christmas. So sales will probably start to taper off a little bit as, you know, things start to not be able to be delivered by Christmas time. You'll probably see that dip there. And then leading into the new year, obviously it'll be definitely a slow and return you areas a lot of folks refer to it as. So yeah, I think it's kind of that holding pattern right now for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see, Ryan here. Thoughts on the upcoming API changes, changes age and inventory labs struggling to adapt. Oh yeah. Okay. So basically like the question is, what are our thoughts on the shipment API changes? It doesn't affect us, which is lovely for us, but it is going to cause some problems. I am hoping that the companies that this is their main bread and butter, I hope are going to be quick to adapt. This is why I always first hype up the team before our product when people talk about or ask me why is Aura better than X, Y, and Z. What normally happens in the Amazon software space is they're not real tech companies. You'd be right to question me and say, well, Dylan, they have technology, they're software companies. What's the difference? To me, I think language matters here. And it comes down to they don't have that deep expertise inside the company. A lot of what happens is they hire developers or programmers overseas for 40, 50, 60 grand a year. India, Ukraine, things of that nature. That's a very different thing than hiring software engineers for 6 figures inside the company where they are deeply embedded. Why does that matter? And why do I bring that up? Because speed is a big deal. A lot of these outsourced development teams are usually slow to implement because a lot of times they don't have good direction. There is no real CTO who knows the code base in and out, who understands the architecture and can say, hey, here's exactly what we need to do. Here's the PRD. Just go and execute. We got 2 weeks to do it. There's not that leadership in place. It's just, typically a non-technical founder, kind of like myself, being like, hey, we need to fix it. And like that. And then the team's left to just kind of figure it out, but they're really not at that caliber of an engineer who can just say, let me look at the docs. Let me see what makes the most sense. I'll make a recommendation. If you're good with that, we'll run with it. There's not enough stake in the outcome and the performance of what happens. And I think that does matter, right? Like when you have somebody on your team, especially an engineer who actually cares about what you're building and they're bought into that, the decisions they're going to make are very different. It's not about inking out hours. Like nobody in our company gets paid hourly. It's like, no, everybody gets a salary because think about it from an incentives perspective. This is where a lot of people, by the way, a lot of non-technical people, when they start to want to get into software, they're like, you know what, there's this development company. I'll pay them. It's an hourly rate of $100 an hour for a developer. I'll pay them to do it and I'll shortcut a lot of things. Okay, well, here's the problem. The incentive is that they make more money the more hours they work on something. So how do you hack that? Something that should only take 3 days is now going to take a week. Something that should take 2 months is now going to take 3 months. They're incentivized to go slower and also not to write hyper efficient code, highly maintainable code. Why? Because when something breaks or needs to be changed, it's now going to take twice as long to fix it, which means they make more money. That becomes a problem. Versus a salaried software engineer, an actual engineer, very different. Usually great engineers are kind of lazy. They're like, what's the fastest way I could do this right? You know what I mean? And I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but I think that's true. And I mean that in a positive way, because the way they're making decisions is things like, using first principles and like, okay, that would take 3 weeks to do it this way, but I think there's a way I could do it in 1 week, but we're going to trade off X, Y, and Z. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Let's do that. Then we go faster. Right. So I know at some companies, I won't name call anyone. There are some companies right now where the engineering team has left. They had actual engineers and the engineering team has left, and they are now hiring programmers overseas at half, if not a third of the rate. Well, one, it can take months for a new developer to really understand a code base before they can even begin to make changes, right? There's so much context you have to keep in mind and learn and understand. If I make a change here, where else do I need to make it? And what's the second and third orders of those changes being made? So even if they can't just jump in and start making changes, they have to go dramatically slower in the process. And so that's going to slow things down. So depending on how the company is organized from a team perspective, they're going to adapt incredibly fast or very, very slow. That's just the reality of it. I will say Amazon is not the best at giving you a large heads up on a lot of this stuff. But they usually make it pretty clear it will be deprecated on this date. So you kind of know what's up, right? Like you still have, in theory, enough time to make changes. Like even the MWS to SP API, there's plenty of time to do it, but it was a big undertaking. I mean, you're talking your entire software relies on that one API, and they're changing it. They're actually saying it will stop working, and you have to do all the things you're currently doing, but do it this way. I mean, that's why we rebuilt everything, because it's like first principles, ground up thinking. What's new here that we can do that we couldn't do previously, and like it's just fundamentally different. So, I don't think it's that big of a change necessarily. It's one thing that you're doing, but depending on how the changes are being made, or what the changes are, should I say, it could very much change the workflow inside an application of how things are done, which means now you have to go to design, you have to think through all those different things. Like you could be changing a lot. Some changes like this are very easy, where you're just swapping basically the API endpoint, right? Just instead of using this URL, use this other URL. That's relatively straightforward. But if there's fundamental changes in how the API itself works, that takes a lot longer, because you really need to understand how to use that properly. Is there different throttling that's involved? Some functionalities may move from one endpoint to a very different endpoint, and that might not be necessarily clear. Like, there's a lot here, I mean, this is why you need to be able to move fast and have an incredible team that can sit down and really understand what these changes mean. How do we take advantage of the new opportunities inside that new API, so that not only can we just get back to neutral, meaning our software does the same thing it did yesterday, but also here's some new stuff that's cool that we just previously couldn't do because the API didn't support it, but now it does. It's a lot of thinking. And unfortunately, your outsourced developers or your overseas developers, that's not their strong suit. There's a reason why there's this hierarchy of nomenclature, right? You have programmers and developers, you have software engineers, vastly different. So it's, it's going to be interesting. I hope that it becomes a non-issue, but I think it is going to be cumbersome for some companies for a little while.
Yeah, and I always try to not discuss in great detail coding stuff, because that is very much a foreign language to me. But in general, coding is its own language, and then within different products and their own code bases, I look at those as like different dialects of the same language. So if you are hiring anyone that's new, whether it's a software engineer in the US or within the continent, or overseas, it's going to take them time to get up to speed on that and learn how to speak that language and then start to implement things. So yeah, I mean, I don't have any experience working with any teams overseas, but definitely kind of a risk and reward, especially when, like you said, they're incentivized to work longer on things. They're not going to necessarily be focused on optimization and making themselves more, not reactive, but just quicker to implement things. There's no real incentive for them to do so. So that's always a slippery slope when you start to kind of bring in those types of teammates to try and accelerate growth or stay up to date on certain things. That can definitely be a double-edged sword sometimes.
Yeah, and here's another problem too that you brought up. Like, there are different languages when you're coding. Some are older and antiquated more so than others. Your amazing software engineers want to work on modern languages. Why? Because they're easier to do. If you look at the tech stack of a lot of the, I call them legacy software companies in the Amazon seller space, they've been around for a decade plus. Most of them are written in very old languages, which makes it hard because you have to compete as a software company. You have to compete to get amazing software engineers, because they can go work at Twitter, they can go work at Facebook, whatever. Although I don't think many people want to do that anymore, but you have to do that. And if you say, hey, like, we'll pay you really well and come work here, but you're going to work in .NET, they're like, what? I don't want to do that. It sounds horrible. It's not fun. It's like, okay, so what are you left with? Well, you kind of have two options. You either just take it as it is and you go and offshore it, which again creates the problem we've been talking about, or you take however long it takes to re-architect and rebuild your software from the ground up. which is also really cumbersome because it's time consuming. It costs tons of money, but is a good investment in the long term of the software. That's a hard decision. It's especially for some of these very large companies that they've been around for a while. They've been the go-to for X, Y, or Z, but there is the law of entropy. And so I've always said, like, if you're not growing, you're dying. That's just a fact, right? If you took a house and you cleaned it once a week, you're fighting entropy. But if you left the house and you did nothing, you locked the doors, sealed everything, and walked away, given enough time, it will fall to entropy. It will become derelict, right? Business is the exact same thing. Software's basically the exact same thing. Some people make the assumption, well, the code hasn't gotten worse, therefore entropy doesn't exist. Well, it's not true, because the external, aka the world, has progressed. So you've frozen yourself in time and became antiquated. So what is to stop another team building with cutting edge languages and tech stacks to come in and say, well, we're going to do what you do in a modern way, listening to your customers? And you can say, well, but we're the market leader. Yes, but not for long in those cases. Yeah, welcome to the fun part of running a software company. I mean, these are the things you have to think about, and they're not easy. But again, if you're building a company to last, this is how you have to think about it. And you have to know that every Amazon software company has what's called platform risk, meaning our risk as a company is Amazon. Because if Amazon is just like, hey, we don't like you anymore, cut you off, great, you're done. You don't have business now. What comes with that is different types of risk. And one of those risks are things will change. They can just be like, hey, that API works differently now. Adapt or die. That's just the way it works. So it's kind of like the emergency fund, right? People say you should have 3 to 6 months of cash as an emergency fund. Well, some people will go against that and say, well, what emergency specifically? I don't know. I cannot foresee that. But can I foresee a non-zero percentage chance of an emergency happening, period? Yes. Okay, so let's just do that as a safety net. I can't tell you what will change as a developer, but I can tell you that something will change. And so if you write your code in such a way that those changes are more easy than they could be, that's a good thing, right? I mean, it's funny how so much of the Amazon software world just doesn't follow best practices, even in just regular coding. Like it's not componentized. It's just not good software. I hate to be that way, but it's just not. There's a lot of foundational best practices, but we talk about this a lot, even with sellers, right? Like, you're great at sourcing, but you negate the foundation of understanding finance in business or accounting in business. It's like, you don't need to become an expert at those things. And certainly people say, hey, outsource that to a bookkeeper and all those things, of course, but you still need to understand enough to make good decisions. And I talked about this on a live last night. You know, it breaks my heart when somebody gets hit with a Section 3 and they say, if I can't get this fixed in 2 weeks, I have to shut down the business because I have no money. But why not have 2 to 3 months cash in the bank? Well, because I want to spend it on inventory. Of course you do. But eventually you get to a point where you've grown an asset. And so now the risk is not, what if this doesn't work? The risk is, what if it stops working? So now you have to switch over into protection mode, right? When you first get started, you could care less about any of that because you have nothing to protect, right? If it goes to zero tomorrow, it's zero right now. What does it matter? Sure. But once you've built the asset, now you need some layers of protection. And I love the startup phrase, and I say this often, just don't die. Because think about this. If you can still exist tomorrow and you can keep doing that for 3 months, that's however many days that you get to continue working to solve the problem. And all you need to do is keep existing. There are times in business where it's not about scaling and crushing it. Sometimes you're just on the defense, trying to protect the castle, so to speak. And you're just like, I just need to be here tomorrow. And like, that's all I care about. That's survival. Sometimes it'd be like that. Right. And that's fine. But again, you want to be able to position the company in such a way that things that would take your competition out in 2 weeks would take 3 months to knock you out. It's a different philosophy. And so there's these foundational best practices in everything you do that you can just steal, right? I love like school because they're like, hey, don't cheat. You know what's great about reality? You should cheat because nobody cares. Nobody's grading you. Like that's actually a superpower to go be like, well, how do they do it? Like if you respect a company in some way, shape, or form, we'll just go figure out how they do what they do and why they do it the way that they do it, and then just replicate it. I mean, that's how we started the process of making our support so amazing. It's not because I'm special. I went to the company who wrote about this and said, great, I'm stealing all your stuff, which they wanted me to do because they wrote blog posts on how to do it. And that was our foundation. And now that foundation has allowed us to build upon it and create our own stuff. It's the exact same in every single subject. And that's really how you go 0 to 80. That 0 to 80 is really just the best practices, right? In some of the mental models like inversion, instead of asking how can it be amazing, you invert it. You say, how could it be stupid? Okay, write out that list. Great, that's your don't be stupid list. Don't do those things, right? You can kind of shift the perspective on it. And so like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are big fans of basically saying like, let's not worry about making amazing, life-shattering, super genius decisions. A lot of times we just need to stop making stupid decisions, and that's enough. So I think this is a big gap in the Amazon space right now. And I'm telling you, if you hear that and you take action on it, a lot of amazing things can and will happen. But this is that unsexy stuff, right? One of the most boring classes I ever took outside of accounting, I hated accounting, was managerial accounting. Until one class, we learned how to look at option A versus option B from a financial decision perspective and actually run the calculation. It sounds super simple, but we don't do this. That completely changed my Amazon wholesale business because now I could look at things and create scenarios and make better decisions. Well, I took the best practices of managerial accounting and then just applied it to my Amazon business. And all of a sudden, I now had a framework to make purchasing decisions based off of. It wasn't because I was super smart. I just stole it. I hate even using that language because obviously I didn't, but you know what I mean.
No, it makes sense. I mean, and I think this is one area that's great in terms of how the Amazon seller space has kind of evolved over the last couple of years. Obviously, I'm just over the 1 year mark in terms of really being heavily involved in it. But based on your own experience, it went from a very private, cards close to your chest type environment to where it is very community based now, where you can reach out to folks for, hey, how are you solving this problem? Or how do you go about this? So I would definitely encourage folks who are early on in their Amazon business journey to reach out to those folks for best practices around kind of protecting yourself or having some sort of backup plan, or like you said, perhaps an emergency fund, whatever terms you want to use. Just reach out to folks who have been in the space for a long time and how they kind of protect themselves in scenarios like that. And then it's funny, you like you said, this isn't necessarily like the sexy, exciting stuff about running a business, but more often than not, the most important things are not the sexy, exciting stuff. That's why not everybody in the world runs their own business or starts their own business, because there are so many, for lack of a better term, line items that you need to go through that seem laborious, seem tedious, but they're very
and they are
intrinsic. Right, absolutely. But they're so vital to your own performance and sustainability as a company.
Yeah, and I did a live with a private group last night, and towards the end, we started talking about a bunch of cool, nerdy stuff. They wanted to go deeper on some AI stuff. And, I just started to paint this picture of this problem and how I think you'll solve it. Because, and I know you've heard me say this, but language does matter. But language is interesting because if you don't have the right, terminology to use, you can never ask that question because you don't know that it exists. right? If you've never heard the word accounting before, and that means you can never ask the question, what is accounting and how do I do it well? So there's this problem of you can't ask the question unless somebody kind of proactively answers you, right? Gives you that language. What's interesting about AI though is, I'm playing around with Claude. So it's Anthropic's Claude, and they have something called projects. And basically you can upload a bunch of knowledge into the context and have conversations with it, right? So it's not just this massive general, conversation. I'm giving it some guardrails, so to speak. And I was thinking about this. I was like, okay, well, why do people struggle going to find this foundational knowledge? Well, I think one is what we just said, is the language problem. Two, there's probably just a lot of friction of like, I got to go learn this stuff. This kind of sucks, right? Like, I don't want to go read an accounting textbook. Well, nobody does. I think I still have mine, right? But what if you said, hey, ChatGPT, whatever, Perplexity, find me the best rated books on business finance. And I want to make sure it includes all the best practices that a business owner should be aware of. It goes, okay, cool. Here's the 5 books. Okay, here's what you do. You go find the PDFs versions of those 5 books. You throw it into your project, the whole book. And then you ask a question. Hey, I suck at this. There's a lot of things I don't know. I'm a novice. Explain to me like I'm 5. Everything first, right? So we go super high level, and it breaks it out. What are the areas of business finance I really need to know about? Just give me a list. And it goes, okay, there's accounting, there's investments, there's blah, 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 there's taxes. Okay, cool. Okay, let's do an 80-20 using the Pareto principle on this. I want you to create a curriculum that's really condensed, so it doesn't need to be super academic. I want it to be hyper practical. Do that, please. Here you go. Great. All right, now let's go top to bottom. So instead of reading those 5 books, which you probably wouldn't do anyways, because that's a lot of friction. It's a big time investment. Now you're just having a casual conversation. And if you hate typing and reading, great. Turn on voice mode and have a conversation like we are right now. Or you hit a problem and you're like, man, I don't know what to do in this situation. Go ask your project. Hey, in this situation, here's all the details. What do you recommend and why? Okay. Right. So when I'm talking about how these things are going to unlock a lot of latent potential, it's this kind of stuff, right? There's the friction between what you want to do and actually doing it. That could be too high, right? And so there's this model where basically like you doing an action is a combination of how much friction it is to do and how much motivation you have. Motivation needs to be much higher than the friction for you to accomplish something. Okay, well, if I can't change the motivation because I'm not super excited about accounting, but I kind of need to know it, so I have enough motivation. If I can instead take the friction from up here way down to here, I can still solve the problem. And that's what AI is allowing you to do. So imagine taking all the amazing resources you found on selling, all the blog posts, courses, everything, you dumped it all into there. That's your FBA coach. Next time you hit a problem or you're not sure what to do, you just ask the question. It goes through all that information you gave it access to, and it just tells you the answer. I mean, this is like mind-boggling cool stuff. So again, how do you find those foundational best practices? It can be really difficult to do, but if you're using the tools you have access to basically for free, it could shore that up for you and compress the amount of time for you to figure those things out, right? I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, it could literally say, here's the 3 things you need to do now. And one of those things might be have a 3-month, emergency fund for the business. Okay, cool. How do I do that? Based on what? Based on your cost. Oh, okay, cool. Let's calculate. Hey, here's my cost. Okay, well, you need $6,000. Okay, well, I don't want to do that in next week. Okay, well, let's do it over 3 months. Here's how much you should automatically send over to that account, right? Like one of the books might be Profit First. You take the PDF version of Profit First, you throw it up in there, and it tells you exactly what to do. I mean, this is nuts. So I'm hoping a lot of this stuff, a lot of these problems that sellers struggle with, will change because you'll be able to self-serve solving those problems.
Yeah, and I think asking the why is an important piece as well. It's great to know how to do something, but if you know the why, I mean, your business might be a little bit different than typical businesses or someone who's giving that advice, and that's going to just help you proactively avoid other obstacles. So how to do it, why to do it, and then you can kind of form your own best practices for your own business setup or business model as well.
Yeah, so here's a good example. Will, what's up, guys? Just got my first IP complaint this morning. Any advice on how to solve this? No. I would heavily recommend checking out Chris Grant. I think he's got a lot of great information on how to handle these. Here's a great example. In the ether, we know how to solve this, right? There is a seller somewhere who knows how to solve this. Go to Perplexity. This is an experiment. I'm not going to promise you any outcomes. Go to Perplexity and say, hey, I'm an Amazon third-party seller. I just received an IP complaint. What are the most useful ways to overcome that, or something along those languages, and maybe even upload or give it, copy and paste the exact IP complaint and watch it go to Seller Central's docs, find out exactly what they recommend, go to Twitter, go to blog posts, YouTube videos, all these different things. And then basically what it's doing is it's going out into that ether and then just pulling it straight to you and be like, here you go. Give that a shot. See Carlos. Hey, Dylan. Last night's Zoom call was outstanding. By far the best Zoom call. Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, Carlos was there while I got to geek out. So we got to geek out on Aura, repricing, all that cool, all the models and frameworks we talk about all the time, which is great. And then I think I blew everybody's mind with the AI stuff. That's my fun part. When people like just jaw drop when I say stuff. I'm like, no, seriously. So that's gonna go. Yeah. Give that a shot, Will. I think that will help a lot. But again, I think Chris Grant has a lot of. I think he's just at Clear the Shelf on Twitter. I think he's got a lot of stuff on IP complaints. I know he did a recording on Section 3 specifically recently because he went through one and he shared what he learned. But I'd be hard pressed if he didn't have something on that.
Yep.
See, we need that coach for sellers that, like, you're a brand new seller, you just get an email and it's like, hey, here's access to it. Ask whatever you want. And you're like, I just got Section 3. It goes, great, do this. Just done, And when something changes, it changes itself, right? That's going to be crazy. But what's cool is, again, you can build the stuff yourself, right? Like, I can go take all the best advice from Y Combinator, from Peter Thiel, from Paul Graham, Sam Altman, whatever, throw it all into a Claude project and be like, cool, I have this problem. What do they recommend I do? And it will just give me the answer and explain why it's giving me that answer. I think I created a project for, basically I call it my leverage coach because I want to get better at utilizing leverage and delegation and outsourcing, stuff like that. I think I'm almost at 60 documents uploaded, including one whole book.
Nice.
That's crazy. And I still have more room. There's like a maximum amount you can give it. But it's a lot. It's pretty crazy. So it's good stuff. Actually, I tweeted about this, I think Monday, where it was like, hey, new hack. Whenever you're reading a book and you want to actually practically implement it, I know I have this problem where I can read the book, but I struggle to transfer that over into action. Get the PDF version, upload it, and just be like, cool, what's step one? And just be like, let me just go, welcome to ADD, executive function problems. I need some hand holding sometimes, especially with a large context of information. This can just walk you right through it, which is super, super cool.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way, where if I have a lot of information that I've either just consumed or is presented to me, it kind of makes my mind go here and then there and then branching off. And I need that linear checklist or process to kind of go through and keep me just on the road with some guardrails. Otherwise, I end up taking detours and jumping off and jumping back on and being like, oh yeah, I was actually doing this. And so, having both access to the knowledge, but then kind of actionable items to take it further is always gonna help me anyway. I don't know how everybody else does that, but
my issue is that I get overwhelmed with too much context. So I'm like, I don't know where to start. It's like too much. But if I have it broken down, oh my gosh, so much easier. So nice little life hacks there if you got ADD like me. But yeah, I wish there was more exciting news right now. It doesn't look like there's anything happening. I mean, it's the end of the year, so business taxes, that's always exciting. Listen, here's what I will say. PSA, don't wait till the last minute to start to organize all your tax information and then send it to your CPA. Don't do that. You're not going to have a good time. Start doing that on the sooner side. And ideally, you should be like closing your books at monthly, doing quarterly things just to make it easier for you. Like one big swoop at the end of the year is like really a struggle, especially if they're like, oh, you owe us 60 grand. You're like, I have $10,000 in the bank. What do you mean? Like that happens way more often than you guys realize. But that's easily avoidable. So again, some of that non-sexy stuff. But I think it's a good time to start thinking about what went well for you this year and what added a lot of friction and anxiety and stress and overwhelm, and then writing out a list of those things and then saying, okay, well, for 2025, what systems or processes can I put into place to take my most frictionful, stressful thing and make it not that? And then again, use things like Perplexity, ChatGPT, whatever, to go and find best practices for just how to get started, right? That way you're not sitting down with a blank page trying to solve a problem you've never really solved before. Go avoid the blank page problem using AI and just say like, how do I get started on this? And then build upon that. I think that's going to be super, super helpful for a lot of people. And I'm probably going to do a annual review maybe this weekend on the personal front. Farnham Street, so FS.blog, which we've talked about with mental models, they just posted their version and it's actually pretty good. It's not like super lengthy where it's like a little too much, but it's like the questions it's asking is really impactful and really enlightening. But then it's quickly getting to what do we do about that? I was like, oh, okay, nice. Some of these are very, what went well, what went bad, and like that's kind of it. It's like, well, if what went well, I want to do more of it. And if it went bad, I want to do less of it. Like we need to transition from the review to action items relatively fast in that same session. So I forget the exact link. They emailed me for it. But just fs.blog, I'm sure there's a pop-up for it. They're asking for your email. I'll let you know that. I'm already on their email list, so that doesn't bother me, but something to think about.
Yeah, and I'd be curious if anyone saw like trends on like product categories or anything. I know some folks either like focus on certain areas and things. I know Legos are pretty popular. I bought a couple friends some Lego sets, which has kind of become one of our hobbies again in the last few years. But I'd be curious if anyone had, specific, whether it was clothing, toys. I know makeup's always selling semi-fast depending on what it is. So always happy to kind of discuss trends, maybe things that performed well, things that didn't. Would be curious to see if there was anything that stuck out over the last few weeks. But yeah, my year in review will be pretty simple. I think I had a good year, and it's just trying to replicate a little bit of it again. Maybe instill a couple better habits, probably on the eating front more so than anything. That's always hard.
Me too. Yeah. I'm a big burger and pizza guy. I can't really help it, but yeah, got to work on that. It seems like too there's a lot of people still getting gated on a lot of stuff. So like you brought up Legos. I'm still seeing people on Twitter getting gated on Legos, which is kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's not, again, my theory is that going into 2025 and Q1, a lot of this Section 3 stuff will pull back. I don't think it's going to go away necessarily. I think they're going to utilize that as a tool where it makes sense. So it just means you have to be way more strict on TOS compliance, things of that nature. So while it's less fun that way, it's a maturing industry. That's just bound to happen. Walmart will do this eventually as well. They're kind of in their Wild West immature phase right now. I don't say immature in like a derogatory way, but like it's new. There's a lot of things they're not going to be hard on because they need a lot of you guys to come over enough time. That will change. That's just the natural evolution of these networks, if you will, of these platforms. So again, I'm hoping these really pull back in Q1. You know, it's kind of frustrating. Just every day somebody's getting hit with a Section 3 or a regate, and it just feels nonstop.
Yeah, definitely still seeing those. I know there was a huge spike in those, and it seems to have come back down. I won't say to normal because it's definitely more frequent than it was prior to that big spike. But yeah, I think it's not surprising that Amazon's maybe being a little heavy-handed on that stuff, given the high percentage of sales that come through at this time of year. Hopefully, like we've said, it will lighten up a little bit in January and February. Hopefully more people getting reinstated. But I wouldn't be surprised for Amazon to sort of provide ideally some sort of checklist or things to prevent that in the future, knowing that they have a high number of sellers and they don't want to discourage folks from migrating to other platforms, especially with Walmart kind of growing in popularity. I've definitely heard a lot of folks in chat starting to segue a portion of their inventory into that marketplace. And it'll be interesting to see how that does develop. I think right now, the general sentiment around Walmart is lower sales velocity, higher margin. Seems to be the most common trend, but it will be interesting to see as they, like you said, mature and get more data from a higher number of sellers, what sort of processes they implement. And like we said, it's always nice to, not in this scenario, have an emergency fund, but have a backup plan, best practices, should things go wrong on any marketplace, whether it's Amazon, Walmart, or anywhere else you may be selling as well.
Yeah. In thinking about Walmart as a platform, curious to get your thoughts on this, because my thought is Walmart as a brand is very much an older generation brand, right? Our generation and younger default to Amazon. I don't think they're really thinking about shopping on Walmart and comparing it to Amazon. So if that is true, as that older generation is no longer here, in theory, then the demand should go down unless they can change that brand, change that perception, which I think is going to be a big challenge for them as a platform. So I'm curious to see the longevity of it, right? That's another thing. I mean, Walmart's relatively new in this way. You're starting to see Target play around with this third-party idea as well. I think that gets into a nice middle ground between Amazon and Walmart in terms of a generational brand. Like, I have no problem. I would rather go to Target than Walmart any day. I like Target. I don't have a problem with it. Walmart has some preconceived notions. Like, there's Facebook pages on, people at Walmart. Like, it's a whole thing, right? So I do wonder if, or not if, but like how the platform wars is what I'm going to call it, plays out over time. Because you have they're carving out their own section of the market that they already own, taking it online. And then what's the second order of that? I'm not quite sure yet. But I am curious how they're internally thinking about this as a potential problem. Maybe they're like, dude, that's not a problem at all. We could care less. I could be overthinking it. I don't know. But I don't know. I'm curious to get your thoughts.
Yeah, and it's funny, like growing up, and folks who have joined office hours before know I'm a big movie guy. When I initially started to build my Blu-ray collection, it was between eBay for deals, Walmart in person. Walmart always had the best deals shopping in person.
Got those bins, man.
Yeah, the $5 bins. You got to kind of dig to the bottom for the good ones there. But yeah, it's funny, I've never really thought of Walmart as an online shopping center, for lack of a better term. I am kind of in between generations in the sense where I definitely remember shopping in person at Walmart, but when I do shop online, it is primarily on Amazon. With that being said, Walmart's definitely being pretty aggressive, and I don't know if you've seen this, Dylan, in terms of their marketing approach to
much better,
bringing more light or shed some of the spotlight onto them as opposed to Amazon.
They just got my wife with we were on, I think, Hulu, and we got a Gilmore Girls Walmart ad, and she was laser focused. I was like, oh, they just got you. Like, huge Gilmore Girls fan. Did the coffee kind of thing, went into it really well, but it was for like shopping online on Walmart. I was like, dang, that okay. And that's my point, right? Like, I'm hoping they are thinking about this and trying to solve that. But like Gilmore Girls is, I'm not an expert on it in time frame, but I imagine that's more of a millennial generation thing. So clearly they're targeting millennials with those ads. I mean, they're doing it on streaming services instead of cable, as an example, at least on this campaign. So it does seem like, based on that, they are thinking about this. But eventually they're going to have to hit younger generations too, which is always true in business, right?
Yeah. And yeah, kind of doubling down on like the marketing thing, like the podcast commercials I've heard from them are about it as a marketplace. Like the word marketplace is used, which we know is kind of common terminology for Amazon sellers, especially. So kind of shining light on that as a place to sell products. And then kind of like on the consumer side, like you said, Gilmore Girls would be geared to somewhat, for lack of accurate knowledge of like when that show stopped being released, like 30 years old and older would probably be that primary demographic they were using.
That's us.
I can't think of like, right, exactly. I can't think of any specific other celebrities, but I do recall seeing big names being in these Walmart commercials, trying to just make it more, not necessarily the primary place to shop online, but they're trying to establish itself as a viable option. And then I'm sure they'll start to kind of trickle down that marketing strategy towards younger folks as the marketplace grows. They get more third-party sellers, there's more inventory. And then there's one person that I follow on social media that talks about food releases from different companies, Goldfish releases graham crackers for Christmas season, whatever it may be. And it is interesting. There is a high number of releases that he refers to as Walmart exclusives. Granted, food space, shopping online, not as popular in terms of like the typical listings I see from our customer base, but definitely a portion of it. I remember Walmart used to have exclusive Blu-ray collections for special editions and stuff like that. So it will be interesting to see if they maybe try to double down on things that would be potentially only available within their ecosystem as well.
Yeah, and this brings up another idea, which is if the shipping timeline is the same, like, Amazon, Walmart, and let's say Target. If I want a specific product and I'm getting the product, but holding shipping, like let's just assume I can get it in 2 days, no matter what platform I'm using on, right? Now it comes down to cost, because I really could care less at that point, right? Well, most people are not going to go price shop like that. They're just going to go to their default. A lot of people are going to default to Amazon. I know I do. But like Perplexity came out with a shopping feature where you say, hey, I want this, and it will go and find it. And you could just hit buy now in Perplexity, which is crazy. Now, does that work for everything? No, but you could take that same concept and apply it to all the major platforms and be like, hey, I want this, find the best price, and I want 2-day shipping. And it goes, cool, that actually right now is Target. Great. Buy it for me. I don't care. So I do wonder if at some point there's not necessarily a consolidation of these platforms, but the way you're interacting with it is going to be very different in terms of like routing your purchase only when there is some advantageous reason to go with platform A versus platform C. That's going to be kind of an interesting behavioral change that we could see in younger generations as AI takes off and becomes more of a starting point. Because like even right now, I still default to Amazon if I know exactly what I want. But if I'm not sure, I'm actually going to Perplexity and saying, hey, I want like a robot cat litter box. And I don't know which one. I'm going to let it do its own due diligence for me and say, I need X, Y, and Z. Like just find me 3 variations. And then I'm going to click over to it. But you could take that many steps further. And so that could change the end consumer's behavior quite a bit. So that's an interesting phenomenon that could emerge with a lot of this stuff.
Definitely.
See, we got a few more minutes here. So let's dive into some questions. When does Aura remove the SKU when they are deleted from Seller Central? Casey, I'll let you handle that one.
Yeah, so in right now, old SKUs that are deleted from Seller Central, they actually won't be deleted from Aura. They'll be moved to an inactive status. So it'll be automatically removed from your standard view on the listings page. That's due to data tracking purposes, just so we can continue to observe that data historically. But What I recommend there is Aura operates on a SKU basis. If you use the top search bar in your account, that's actually going to be the ASIN. But if you're on your listings page and you have old SKUs that keep popping up when searching the ASIN at the top, I recommend using that search bar on the listings page itself. That is a SKU operative search bar. So that'll bring up the specific SKU and it won't show any inactive listings by default. You can pull them up if you want to cross-reference things for those inactive SKUs, but the ability to delete those listings has also been requested. So we are kind of looking at that internally, but have yet to make a release on that as of now.
Yeah. See, is it technically possible to have cost of goods sold synchronized with an outside data source, or import, export, and or manual cogs is the way to go? So we do have our integrations. We don't have an open API yet. So we can import your costs. We don't sync them back and forth. We just import them from one of our 3 integration partners. We are hoping to add an actual public API. We have the support for it. We just need to release it. There's a few other things you need to do with authentication, things of that nature. But that will most likely come hopefully next year. That'd be pretty great, 2025. So yeah, that's the best way to do it. But in terms of like syncing, like having Aura be the single source of truth for your cogs, and then shipping that out, exporting that somewhere else. Only way you're going to be able to do that is using the export functionality. So if you go to uploads in the menu, and then you download a pre-filled template, it will contain all that information. You can use that to upload it into other systems if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. This is an interesting one. I'm curious to know your perspective on pricing, because I'm struggling to comprehend why, on occasions, when the price of an item increases, its demand on Amazon rises simultaneously, leading to a growth in my sales for the same item. Okay. My initial theory from what I have seen is if you have I'm going to call it a very inactive listing, meaning there's not a lot of changes happening on a listing. There's not a lot of price updates. There's not a lot of new inventory coming in and out. Like it's a very stale kind of listing. When you start to make activity occur, it almost wakes up the listing in a weird way. And I think what can happen is your BSR, basically your best sellers rank, starts to lower, because now it's like a signal to Amazon to say like, hey, there's like activity here. Like people are actively moving prices around and trying to find the sweet spot. Let's give it a little bit of a boost and see what happens. That's my only theory. Casey, have you seen, do you have any better theories?
No, I think that's a pretty accurate theory. Amazon, if you go to just the Amazon homepage, they have recommended products. I make the assumption that those recommended products are likely products that have a lot of activity, whether it's sales activity, seller activity, things of that nature. So like you said, if it is a somewhat inactive SKU, Amazon likely isn't promoting that to its general audience as a recommended item. As that velocity starts to pick up and activity starts to increase on that, wouldn't be surprised if they start to kind of show that as a recommended item to potential customers. And then the other thinking there is, if folks are using a repricer, like Maven in this scenario, would still recognize, hey, you're starting to get more sales. Let's maybe raise the price to see if we can continue to get those sales. So if anyone's using Maven on a listing like this, it wouldn't surprise me to see it continue to slowly inch its way upward in terms of that price. I'm not going to guarantee that. As we know, Maven is an AI strategy, so it takes
results may vary.
Right. It takes into account a lot of different scenarios, situations, competitive sellers, metrics, sales data, all sorts of different things. But I can see that happening. I'm not aware of any other platforms that kind of increase a price due to performance. With that being said, not to say that they don't exist out there, but that could be another reason where sales start to come in. Folks kind of respond by raising that price, continued sales. Amazon promotes it more exposure, kind of going on that way. But yeah, I'd be interested if you've seen that on any specific SKUs, Vay, to maybe come into chat and shoot us that SKU. That would just be interesting to look at, but I don't have any, super intelligent or informed theories around that. More so just kind of guesswork on what I would think Amazon is doing on their end, in addition to how sellers may react to an increase in sales speed there.
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. The assumption is that the price raised and then the demand increased, but it actually could be the inverse, that the demand spiked and then therefore Maven, if that's what you're using, reacted to that and then raised the price to take advantage of the added increased demand. Yeah, I think that very likely could be the case. So yeah, I think that's a great comment. Awesome. So we got a few more minutes here. We'll hang out for the time. If there's any last minute questions we could dive deep into, we are happy to go down those rabbit holes with you guys.
Yeah, and I will just make an announcement as well, folks. Obviously, a week from today is Christmas. We will not be doing office hours. Support will also not be live next Wednesday. We will be doing limited support on Christmas Eve morning from 9 to noon. Other than that, we hope yourselves will be doing as well. We'll be spending the time with our families. So 9 to noon on Christmas Eve day. And then after that, we'll pick things back up. Typical times, 9 a.m. for support on Thursday. And then similarly for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, we'll do that same thing, 9 to noon on New Year's Eve day, and then go resuming typical support hours on January 2nd there. So just some reduced support, but definitely enjoy the time with families as well. We'll be doing the same, and we'll be ready to kind of answer those questions as they came in when those typical hours resume there.
Yeah, good call out. Gosh, it's already next week, huh?
Yeah, that thankfully got those last couple gifts in for my girlfriend's family, so I am all set. I just got to wrap and get all the tape. And
I was about to say I need to start wrapping. They're all still in their Amazon boxes.
Yeah,
I have like a mountain in front of me of just Amazon boxes. I haven't even opened them yet.
Yeah,
I just hope they actually showed up correctly.
Yeah, I hope it's all the right stuff. Yeah, that happened to me last year with a couple things.
Yeah, so that's exciting. But yeah, so lighter week for everyone next week. So appreciate that heads up, Casey. With that, we'll let everybody get back to the rest of your week. Enjoy the holiday season coming up. Take some time with your family and friends, chill out, relax a little bit, enjoy yourself. And we will see you in 2 weeks from today. Appreciate you making the time.
Have a good holidays, folks.